All right. Says it's recording. All right. I'll go ahead and share my screen so we can see the what's it create? What? Sorry, give me just a second. Okay, well, I guess while we're waiting, we can fill you in on somebody want to kind of recap the whole Super Saturday.
Oh my word.
Yeah, I can a little bit. Yeah. So the SG, it's Cohen or Cohen, Cohen. Anyway, they're like a firm, right? And they go to like 10 universities or university campuses, and they do like a hiring program there. And Super Saturdays, like when a bunch of candidates come and they interview in like intervals with like several bankers from the firm. And so I guess we're kind of at the end of Super Saturday, and they're trying to decide. They've sorted out some clear candidates that they want to hire and candidates that they obviously don't want to hire. And they're trying to decide on 4 candidates. They have 2 more positions left, and they're deciding between 4 candidates that were kind of a maybe and who to hire out of those 4. Is that good enough?
Yep.
That was perfect.
Yep. I also wanted to talk about, I thought it was really interesting they do the campus recruiting, which is pretty like standard. But it seemed like they took that campus recruiting very, very serious, which they are a big firm. Like they're a big banking company from what it was saying. But it's like called it informal interviews, but it was pretty like cutthroat, like all of the interviewing. And then I would like to point out like the Super Saturday thing, they would pull in these candidates for it would be almost 6 hours of interviewing. And so like so I know that one like some of the questions were like, um, let's see. Like I know one of the questions in here was like what did you like and what did you dislike about the interviews? But I was just sitting there thinking as I was reading it, I was like, I could not imagine 6 hours of just being like kind of grilled. Like some of the interviewers were pretty like laid back and chill, but some of them were like cutthroat. And so I don't know. That was just something that I think since you just to catch you up and stuff, like that was something important to know. It was like 5.5 to 6 hours of interviews for the interviewers and the interviewees, which is important to know, I guess. But I guess we can jump into part one. I have the questions pulled up here. So I guess yeah, imagine if you're the bankers at Super Saturday. And I guess what 2 candidates were you guys looking for? I can pull up the the paper if you guys would like, just so we can refresh on what candidates are who, if you guys would like. Because it was quite a bit to know in this
Yeah,
one.
that would be great. There were several because and then they had like 4 that were contenders, and then they had a list that was kind of like written out, and then they had notes on them, right? Are we? I
Yeah,
guess we're picking from that.
I
So
guess.
I've got it pulled up. I'm on, are you saying, so page 7, hiring criteria, and then candidates for hiring, they go through Natalia, Martin, Ken, and Andy. Those are the 4.
Yes,
Those
that
are the
sounds
4 that we're
familiar.
deciding between.
Yes.
And they
Sorry, I
only have
just
2 positions.
yeah. So
They
there's 2 slots open, so we have to decide out of the 4 which two. Or I guess yeah, it's an independent. I guess he wants us to debate about it because he says explain your reasoning. But if anybody has any immediate thoughts, I have some thoughts right now. Am I glitching?
Yeah, a little bit.
This
Um,
crappy
I
apartment Wi-Fi.
I when I was reading through this, I wanted to pick Natalia. She was the first one, and the last one was his name. He like ran his own business, but they questioned him because he had a low GPA. Was it Martin?
Andy Sanchez is the last one that's on there.
Oh yeah, Andy. That's yeah. I wanted to go with
Yes, the
Natalia
low
and then-
GPA dude. Yeah. Yeah. I agree
He
with
had-
you
just because
100%.
it's like
Yeah.
Natalia, I don't know, she's just got this really like they said she has like a go-getter personality and like she has a lot of valuable skills and already knows a lot. The only reason she's a maybe is because I think it was mainly language barrier. Like
Yeah,
English was
her accent, which I think is kind of borderline like discrimination if they don't
Yeah.
hire her.
Yeah. And then I wanted to do the last one, Andy, because like he's started his own business and ran it successfully. Like he knows a lot of things just from experience. Like, and I think you learn more from firsthand experience than anything you learn in a class. So
I have a
Yep.
question
That's-
about him though, Andy Sanchez.
Uh-huh.
You know, because he ran this successful business. I mean, it was how many millions of dollars? he
2
did this?
million in college.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in revenue. And he was
Yeah.
clearing 400,000 in profits between him and just, you know, his whoever was investing in his company, right? And he said he's going to turn it over to his brother to run, but
Mhm.
it makes me kind of question, would he be I mean, yeah, he's super talented and he has, and, you know, he had like the highest GMAT score, right?
yeah,
And his
that too. He had good
good.
those scores.
But would he be a loyal employee? That's I wonder about that. Would he ever feel pulled to like, you know, is this side business, can it be a side hustle or is it going to need to have his full attention?
Or would yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think he would be a perfect candidate, but I would be kind of,
Yeah,
you know,
I can see where that's a worry.
yeah.
But I mean, I think
Yeah.
if he's turning it over to his brother, then
Mhm.
I would hope he would think it's in good hands and that he wouldn't have to worry about it. But
That was, well,
Yeah.
I had the same thoughts. I wanted to pick Natalia and Andy, but as I was thinking a little more about Andy, he would be the best choice like out of the four. Well, like, you know what I'm saying? The two that I would pick would be Natalia and Andy, but I was thinking like if he's making like I'm thinking because I'm in college, like if I'm making $2 million on my own doing what I want to do, why would I work for this big firm when I could potentially expand and be my own boss? Like, because that's my major. I'm majoring in business management and emphasizing in small business, and like I want to be an entrepreneur. So it begs the question like, why is he doing this? And his reasoning was I like a good challenge, but it's like,
and he wanted a new challenge or something.
yeah, but it's like I don't know.
It seemed kind of weird.
Yeah,
To step
I just thought it
down
was a little
from being
strange.
your own boss
Yeah.
to
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we give like Kevin Goldstein or Ken Goldstein, like, you know, he worked for PwC and they were
Oh.
concerned about him being willing to work 24/7.
with his two little kids.
What do you think they do at PwC?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
People leave the big accounting firms because of the
Of
hours
24/7.
and being a road warrior and all of that. So that's a great call out, Julie.
Huh.
Yeah,
I thought
that's
that
what.
was a little, I thought that was completely naive. Yeah.
And
You know-
I think
they
Ken
are.
would be my second choice too if I didn't choose Andy.
Yeah, for sure.
Then when they mentioned the kids, I was like, oh well, it's like I think he would choose the kids over his job. I'm not sure.
So I'm assuming we're all in agreement that Martin maybe is not the best candidate at all.
Oh, you mean Andy? Oh, who are we talking about?
Martin Street.
Martin,
Yes,
Was
sorry,
he,
I was
he the
lagging.
one?
Do we all agree
Oh,
that Martin
Martin.
maybe is not a good candidate?
Yeah,
How do we
he's-
feel about him? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I mean, he has leaders like I thought he was less qualified as the
What
other three.
Well, he was the military guy, right?
Mhm.
What I will say
Yes.
is, I'll have to read this in more detail. I mean, what's worth noting here is that I think you guys know this. I work for Capital One, which is a bank. Similar, we bet the bank on college hires, and we hire thousands every year across certain campuses. And the Super Saturday, although it's not on a Saturday, when you said, Dylan, 6 hours of I mean, it's not grilling, but it's definitely like it's a
cutthroat.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I would say cutthroat. I would say it's a process. We're highly sought after as far as a company to work for.
Mhm.
And so we need, and with thousands and thousands of out, we need to make sure that we're getting the right fits. I don't know if I would say ours is cutthroat, and it's not like this a little bit, but what I will say is we also do a lot with military, and military has a very hard transition going from a military background and a setup into corporate America. We still work very hard with them to do transition, but going from a military background into investment banking is very hard to do. So I kind of agree with you. I mean, I always like to support the military. My dad's Air Force, this and that. But I do think that would be a really hard transition. And I think that based on his background, like what I just went through, I would say he would probably be how I would rank him number 4.
Yeah, he didn't really also give them any time. Because he had various leadership positions, they never really got to talk with him. And so to me, it's like, well, if you really wanted to work for this company, you would have figured out somewhere in there, for someone to cover for you so you could go and do this interview. Or if you're the president leading whatever, you could have somebody else, Anyway, that's kind of what I thought about it. He didn't seem to make time.
I like what you guys called out on Andy, and I think what I would say there is most banks, I know ours, that you would have to sign a conflict of interest as well as a non-compete. So I think our concerns surrounding like his other business, like on the side and this and that, that's an easy way. That's pretty standard in the industry. So I think that would make sure that at least we've had him sign something. And who cares what his GPA is? Like,
yeah, irrelevant.
This is not, I mean, when they said rocket science, who cares? I mean, this is not, because of all the things that he did on the side and his working experience and all that is way more transferable and speaks to that versus having a 2.8 versus a 3.9. I mean, who cares?
Right.
Like,
and like he had the other high scores on his like SAT.
Right. Yeah.
So
and
yeah.
GMAT scores are huge.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of one of the first things they look at when they're wanting to hire you from MBA school. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have just about the same thoughts as you guys. Pretty exciting stuff right there. I guess we can move on to the next question unless anybody else had like anything else they wanted to add. I mean, sorry, I think I'm glitching the Wi-Fi. But I guess so.
We can hear you okay then. Just so
okay,
you know.
good. I didn't know if the sound was lagging. Okay. I don't know. So I guess this is a really good question. What else would you want to know about the candidates? I feel like I would want to know the most about Ken because yeah, he has little kids, but people do it. Like moms do it, dads do it. Like it's not impossible. And it's tough, but it's not like completely like unheard of. So I feel like I would want to know like, what his day-to-day life looks like with the kids, like if they have a babysitter, like how can we accommodate and how he can accommodate with us, you know what I'm saying? Like that was just my
I think you'd have
thoughts.
to say you totally like that's where everybody goes, Dylan, and interviews for sure. And just doing recruiting for like almost 2 decades. You can't go there. You can't ask any questions around their family life. If he leads with certain things and says something about his kids, like it's fine. You can note it, but you can't follow up on questions regarding that. And then you got to kind of like pivot and move on to something else. So those are super slippery slopes.
Yeah. It just said, what else did you want to
And they're
know and how would you get that information? And so that's something I would want to know.
So-
But of course I know with recruiting laws, you can't ask that.
Yeah.
But it's like, these are the kind of things you want to find out. But like, yeah.
I know I used to always say outside, tell me, like as you're trying to break the ice, I always said, what are some of the things that you like to do outside of when you're not working? And that's a very broad, and it brings up their hobbies. It brings up, and they might allude to, oh, I'm super busy with my 2 kids. They're this and that. And like, you can just be storing that information and you can like take it all in. But I usually would ask a question about like, what are some of the things that you like to do out when you're not working? What are some of the things that take up your time outside of work that you're excited about? And they usually will lean into something like that with their family.
Yeah, I mean, think about if it wasn't a male, if it was a female that had the, you can't. Interesting. We only had one female candidate on there. The rest were all men.
Yeah, the others were males.
I mean, for all we know, he'd say, oh, we have a nanny and we have this, this, and this. And then you'd be like, okay, well,
I don't know if they asked this in the interview already, but I would want to know like why they chose like SG Cohen or like what do they plan to do? Like what are their goals? Like how long do they plan to stay with us? Or I don't know. What do they look forward for? Or like what do they look forward to like being with us?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's great, Ashlyn. Yeah, what are their feelings? And how do you, they alluded to a lot of them, having, because they're interested also who they're interviewing with. And so, how do you open a question of finding out who else is interested in them? Who's your competition there?
I think you can do, I always did ask that.
Did you?
I would always be like, how are we stacking up against the other companies that you're interviewing with? Like, what is it that interests you about us? And what are any of the concerns that you have versus some of the other offers you might be entertaining? And that's when they would be like, oh, I'm not entertaining any others. Or they'd be like, well, I like this about this company. And then you kind of get the intel on, who else they're interviewing.
That's the part where I forget my questions and concerns. I'm like, I had some, but they just left my mind. Like every single time I'm like, no, I know I should, but I don't.
All right. Well, if anybody doesn't have any other thoughts about part 1, I think we could move on to the interview process, if that's okay. Okay. So, yeah, this is something that I thought was probably the most interesting was the actual interviewers, because a lot of them had a lot of different opinions about all of the people they interviewed. So it asked, why is there so much disagreement between the senior bankers in the Saturday meeting and about which recruits to hire? So anybody have any thoughts on that?
I thought, well, it also like the bankers wanted to get out of there. And some people, so I think they were like kind of pushing to like, let's make a decision and get out. But I think too, like it mentioned, you can do an interview with someone and one person have one opinion of them, and then they can go to another person and they could have a completely different opinion of them. I think sometimes maybe you kind of click personalities maybe better with one or the other, or you have more interest in, one person could have been, they said they tried to, have the bankers there that went to that university. So, but anyway, or sometimes it can be the mood of either person, someone being really kind of ready to be done for the day, or I don't know.
Well, to Dylan's point, well, no, to Dylan's point earlier, when it's a 6-hour whatever, the person, both people at the end are just done. The first person you're viewing with, they're getting the very best of you usually, or the second one because you warmed up, right? By the end, people just like questions over and over again, but that's where they care about to be advanced, or if there are discrepancies in the way that you've answered some questions, because people put on this. So I sit in consensus all the time, and some people are like, "Oh my gosh, this is the must hire," and others are like, "I would never hire them." Like you just get really, so you have to like talk it out a lot. And sorry, because I'm so close to recruiting, I hope this isn't annoying to you all, that like I can relate to, or I do this job every day. I'm not trying to like monopolize the conversation.
No, it's helpful to have
and
your
I'm
insight.
not in that role right now, but I do
Absolutely.
I think like people just might value other things more than on another. Like some people might look more for like their education and their GPA and test scores, while others value work experience more. Like what? So
well, it depends on the team, totally, for sure, what you're looking for, right? The manager that could be desperate for somebody, right, but also feels like they connected, where other people that are like at just an outside perspective looking in, sometimes they're like, hey, well, this was something that was kind of a red flag to me, and I don't know if you would want, I mean, you're exactly right. Like some of the things that people value is very different. But also when you're doing power days, we call them power days, like this, and it's just like maybe each of you are looking for somebody on a team, or you've got, it is one of those things where you're like, who would fit best on my team? Who would be the best dynamic? And like, again, team makeups are very different. And so anyway, yeah, what you were saying, Ashlyn, like +1.
Yep. Anybody else have any thoughts about maybe why there's so many disagreements? I think, yeah, I mean, there was a snowstorm, 6 hours of talking, and people were just trying to go home. I think that put a lot of tension on, and maybe even rushed some decisions. I just don't think it was maybe ideal. But the next question says, might there be better ways to learn about the candidates other than the traditional interviews? Do you guys have any ideas?
LinkedIn.
That's true.
LinkedIn.
Having
social
LinkedIn
media
is good.
I don't know if like looking at their social media is allowed. That sounds kind of stalkerish. But...
What, Glenn?
For example, like another way to learn things from candidates, for example, I heard that before, like a week before, they give you something to read, and then you have to give feedback on that reading. I heard some use those techniques and see what's your feedback on, let's say you got to read a chapter of a book or something. And first step is like, did you actually read it, and then what you thought about it. Like those are other ways of knowing if you're a good fit for maybe a certain type of company. I heard a CEO that he uses that technique.
We have cases. We do case studies at Capital One for certain jobs and certain levels. So you have to pass a case in order to, that is part of your interview. So somebody just is giving you a case and evaluating you on it, and that is a pass or a fail type thing. And then a couple of others do a behavioral interview, which is like this, tell me about a time, it's situational. And others are doing what they call a job fit interview. And a job fit interview is very, it is more specific questions about that job and that can be tailored, as opposed to tell me about a time, as far as situational. So those are the different kinds. We also, for our designers, like in learning and development, we have them come and it's something very simple, like, but they'll have to do a design. And they get that, like Glenn had said, a week beforehand, and it'll say design something and then present it. That's part of it. And then if you facilitate, if you do some training, and that's a job that you're interviewing for, you again would get something that you would come in and teach, and you'd have a week notice. And it's something very simple, but those are, like, again, samples of how you might do the job, that I think are very telling of maybe what your performance might be like, your style, etc. So those are just some ideas.
Cool. Any other thoughts? Because as it moves down, 4 and 5 talks about criteria. And I did want to mention, I forgot to say something earlier, but I did think there's a lot of room for bias, which, like, because some people are only picking based on their alumni, which is kind of like, I don't know. I feel like there just isn't like a set, like, standard, like, oh, you should probably pick a candidate that has X, Y, and Z, or like is closed in these boundaries. I feel like it's kind of just out in the open, which maybe causes some of the disagreement too, going back to that one. I probably should mention that earlier, but I was thinking there's a lot of room for, like, yeah, biases, or yeah. But yeah, question 5 says, like, how do senior bankers know what they're supposed to be looking for in a candidate, and how could this process be improved? So what do you guys think about maybe improving this whole interviewing process?
I don't know, maybe they could have like a rubric of like a score, and score them on like a scale of like, I don't know, 1 to 7. I mean, that's how we hire TA. That's at least how I hired online TAs. I'm a hiring assistant for BYUI. And so we have a rubric, like we watch the interviews and we score them on a scale of like 7 being the highest, and then 1 being like they didn't pass. And they answered like several different questions. And then by the time we fill out like what score they got for each question, they have like in the Excel sheet like this calculation that like gives like an average for like all of the scores of the questions. And so you just get 1 score for each applicant, and then we just pick like the highest score. So there's like I don't feel like there's a lot of room for bias using that like rubric, but
I love that, Ashlyn. That's really cool.
At the end of, if you look in that on page 15 of that SG Cohen, they do kind of have a checklist, but it's not like what you were describing, Ashlyn, which that's a great way to to see who would be a good match. They have a formula.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I feel like maybe they should have, I mean, not everybody has to fit the standard, like in whatever his fit, I can't remember his name. Like, he didn't have like awesome grades, but he had awesome experience. So, like, I just feel like there should be some kind of qualifications that they have to meet, or some kind of characteristics that they should meet. That way it's not like, oh, well, he's an alumni, I like him, pass. So I feel like that would also help with the interviewers.
I think usually the job descriptions are based on, they all have basic qualifications that are on there, and then preferred qualifications is usually how a lot of companies do it. So to your point, Dylan, they would have to meet the basics no matter what. So they'd have to check the box of all of these. And then there's the nice to haves, right? The must haves and the nice to haves. And then would be even better, like, you know what I mean, if they have those. And then it's similar to kind of a rubric, what Ashlyn was saying a little bit. But I think that that's important to have on like, these are the must-haves, these are the nice-to-haves, but then also how do they perform? You're rating them in the interview and grading them like a rubric on like how they answered the question. So usually behavioral interviews, tell me about a time. There usually goes with that as far as a training. Did they say this? Did they give you, do you understand it? And if they did, then they pass that question, if you will.
And
And
I have a
go ahead.
question for you, Heather. In all your years of experience, like, have you ever had a case like where perhaps a person didn't fill these requirements, but you had like what do you say, a feeling that they were gonna do well, and you gave them a chance and they did perform well, or it usually doesn't happen that way?
No, I think
Like, let's put the human
the human
factor,
factor, yeah, gut goes into it all the time. Yeah,
gut
a
feeling.
gut feeling sometimes with some managers. I mean, I think I will say at Capital One where I work, we're very, just because again, you have to assess risk where you are. And then I used to work at a startup, and the startup is very much, Glenn, like, hey, I have a good feeling about this person, or let's give them a try. And sometimes they knock it out of the park, and other times you're like, that was an utter fail. Like, we never should have hired them. There's going to be that with all the people that we just read about too, that checks the box and they just are a professional interviewer and they do great. And then they get in and they're just not a fit and they fail. So yeah, I would say the gut feeling, Glenn, I've done that before on some, and some have totally panned out. I will bet the bank on some college hires. That have worked them through school, that have this and that. I've had a lot of success in my career. They're ambitious, they're hard workers. I mean, I could go on and on, especially from certain schools. And so to your point, Dylan, as far as bias, sometimes because you've had so much success from hiring people from a certain school because they have a program that they've gone through, you usually will be like, hey, we've had success with all of these, why not this person? But that person is different and they might fail. So yeah, I think that there's quite a few situations where you get it wrong, the hiring call. You just don't know until they get there.
Yep, I agree.
With me, I can't really do that. Hiring people, like looking at job applications, I like look at like their resume, their cover letter, and I'll be like, oh, that's nice. Oh, that's nice. Like I have a good feeling about this person. And then I look at their grade and then like they didn't make the grade. I'm like, oh, joking.
Yeah.
Like,
I was gonna say
it hurts so bad. I'm like, no.
I was gonna say I
You
think
were
it
doing
really
so
just
good.
it really just depends on the job because like yeah, Ashlyn, in your instance, like they have to in order to teach others, like you have to have a good grade. But it's like I was general manager of a Popeyes my senior year and I hired and fired as a kid. And so like it was hard for me because I was hiring like people that were way older than me. It's like I don't know what I'm doing. Like I hope that you're gonna do me good, make my job easier because I was not experienced. I did not get the proper training. So it's like a lot of my experience has been from gut. It's like almost begging, like, please do a good job because I can't. But in the instance of this case, it seems like this is a really sought after position and it's like a serious position, you know. So I feel like it really just depends on the case. But I do like some people like they have the ability and the capability to do great. And sometimes they just don't have the resume for it, you know. So I feel like the gut is a good thing to have too, because everybody's capable of doing great things. So anything else on the interview process
That's a
though,
great
before
point.
we go on to thank you. Before we go on to part 3? Any other thoughts on the interview? Okay, it looks like we're getting yep, the school recruiting. So I like this question. Is Ray's core strategy or core school strategy a good one or not? What do you guys think about how Ray handled the school recruiting?
You mean like when they tried to go into the top 10 schools, but there were like bigger companies there, and so they just decided to go to like the
Yeah.
alumni schools? Is that what you're talking
How
about?
Ray
I liked
yeah.
it. I liked it, to be honest. 'Cause, I don't know, because like you won't get as many candidates, I feel like, if there's a bigger, more familiar company that you're trying to compete with.
I think, yeah, I think they chose from the top 25. Is that what they chose from the other schools? I'm trying to find it. Yeah. Pay more attention to the next 15 schools in the top 25 was Ray's new strategy. And it worked well because they got the top students from those schools instead of getting kind of mid-grade people from the Ivy League schools, right?
Mm. Yeah, totally.
I think it gives you, I think it
That's
gives
on
you,
page 4, right, Julie?
yeah, here, let me see. Yes, on page 4. And one thing that I think of is that would also create a different variety of people from all over. When we're talking about, Harvard, Yale, those schools those are, well, and then they've got Berkeley, they've got stuff out in California, but even in the Midwest, or in the South, I mean, there are excellent universities all over, and that have, I think it would just, what am I trying to say? I think it would create more diversity. I think you would get a different group of people everywhere you would go. And I think about my husband when he was in MBA school and he was interviewing at all of these. He went to UT Austin for his MBA, and he was doing kind of one of these super Saturday things, but they would fly you out to the company, and he was there with Harvard people, with all, so it was a mix of Ivy League schools and just other really good business schools. So I think it just gives you an opportunity to have, I don't know, a variety of people. Is that being biased to the Ivy League? Kind of like that I'm stereotyping kind of what I think an Ivy.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was like, well, it's nice to have people from these Ivy Leagues and stuff, but I don't want to make this assumption because I know there's a lot of people that have worked hard, but to get into Ivy Leagues, they're cutthroat and the best of the best. But it's also nice to have people from other universities who have worked while they're in school and who have like put themselves through school, because that shows they have good work ethic and they can do what it takes to succeed. So having a good mix of both is really good for their company, I think. Anybody else have any, or maybe some of these questions jump out to you? Or the pros and cons of their approach to recruiting on campus? That's a good one. What are some of the pros and cons of them doing this?
Well, I think the con is them being there on campus. If they're worried about getting out and getting home, they need to maybe have in their budget so they can fly the students to them that they're really interested in. You gather and you meet and kind of get resumes and do a little bit of interviewing there and then take them to the company. And that way you can dwindle down the ones that you're going to give offers to. And then you're not in such a hurry to like, let's get out of here. We've been doing this all day. And,
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I might be biased towards ours, but ours is definitely let the recruiters weed out those on a campus and then fly them in for a power day on our campus so that they get to see the culture and where they'd be working and just get a feel for, and everybody is, you're not traveling and using your Saturday, so to speak, but they're all there. And that the pro is, again, they get to see the culture and they get to see, or a little bit of the culture, get a feel for it, the campus, where they'd be working, all of that, which is kind of a better approach than meeting them on their own campus, which of course they know very well. I think let the recruiters, weed out some, get some good final candidates, and then fly them in for a power day interview at their facilities.
I agree. Yeah. And that answers a lot of the questions for part 4 about Super Saturday. I agree. I feel like they maybe should have budgeted, because where they're spending money, I feel like they're saving time and a little bit more money if they just have the recruiters come out, meet some people, and then fly out the students that want to, and they could save quite a bit of time and stuff. Does anybody else have any thoughts or anything about
I have one
Super
more
Saturday?
I have one more thing about that. Having them come out, Heather mentioned, them kind of seeing the culture of the company and seeing the campus. And in part of the, one part of the recruiting, whatever, I can't remember if it was in the first one or the second. I think it was in the first, or not the first, the other case thing, the other Harvard Business case, the guide to recruiting and good and bad times, that one. And it mentioned that when you're recruiting, you want to get them excited about your company, right? And by inviting them there for that next phase could really, kind of, if that's who you really want, could actually help seal the deal a little bit for wanting the applicant, wanting to be there and get them going somewhere else.
Definitely. I agree. That's a good thought. Okay, well, I guess we can do the final wrap up. What did we learn? What did we learn from this week? What's the difference between recruiting and hiring? Anybody want to answer that?
I feel like recruiting is just kind of like getting everyone you can, and then like sorting them out, and then hiring is like offering the job or like giving the job to the ones you want.
Yep.
I agree.
Awesome. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, I agree. Recruiting is definitely, like, I've been to a few. They have some on campuses. They have like the little what's it called? It's not recruiting, but it's job markets, which can lead to recruiting and stuff. But I think it's different. It's very important to know the difference between the two. And did you guys have anything cool you wanted to share that you learned? Something that stuck out for you from this lesson? Maybe anything else to share before we close? No? No? Okay. Also, did
I
we
think you
want
did
to?
great, Jen.
Oh, thanks. Did we also want to talk about anything for the doohickeys or anything
Yeah,
else?
I think we need to go over that, but I think you're able to stop recording
Stop the
now.
recording.
If you want to, because he doesn't need to hear the doohickeys, they said.